Welcome to the Inc. Productivity Tip of the Day. Today's tip: strategic objectives alone won't drive change. Here's the value in specific, measurable actions. An expert opinion by Andrea Olson, CEO, Pragmatic. You've sat through those strategy presentations, the ones with the slick slides, the ambitious objectives, the carefully crafted mission statements. Leaders nod, teams take notes, and everyone leaves feeling something. Inspired? Maybe. Perhaps overwhelmed is a better description. Possibly confused. Then Monday happens. Someone asks, "So what does this actually mean for how I do my job?" And the room goes quiet. The problem is, strategy documents are essentially wish lists without behavioral translation. Leadership teams invest months crafting strategic objectives. They debate every word, metric, and timeline. The final document is a masterpiece of corporate aspiration. However, they stop short of the most critical step: defining the specific mindsets and behaviors required to bring those objectives to life. You've shown them where to go, but not how to get there. A financial services company I worked with had set a strategic objective to become the most customer-centric bank in our region. Beautiful sentiment. They measured it through NPS scores and customer retention rates. However, when you walked through their branches or called their service centers, you saw the disconnect immediately. Employees were still being primarily evaluated on sales metrics and transaction speed. Their behaviors reflected what actually mattered to their performance reviews, not what the strategy document claimed mattered. When a customer had a complex issue, representatives rushed through scripted responses rather than taking time to understand the underlying need. Why? Because their schedule allowed 8 minutes per interaction, and their bonus was tied to how many products they could cross-sell. The objective said, customer-centric. The behaviors screamed, transaction-focused. Nobody had translated what customer centricity actually looked like in specific observable actions. The gap isn't accidental. Leaders avoid behavioral translation for several reasons. It feels too prescriptive. There's a belief that smart people should figure out how to execute strategy on their own. Defining specific behaviors feels like micromanagement. It's genuinely difficult. Translating lofty objectives into concrete actions requires deep understanding of how work happens, not how you imagine it happens from the executive suite. It exposes philosophical divides. When you start defining what innovation-driven or customer-obsessed looks like behaviorally, disagreements that were hidden under vague language suddenly become visible. One leader thinks innovation means taking calculated risks. Another thinks it means following proven methodologies. It demands accountability. Once you've defined specific behaviors, you can measure whether they're happening. That makes everyone uncomfortable, leaders included. For example, a common strategic objective is drive innovation across the organization. Most companies stop there, maybe adding some metrics around new product launches or R&D investment. Then they wonder why innovation doesn't materialize. Here's what the behavioral translation might include. From "don't bring me problems without solutions" to "problems are opportunities for discovery." Leadership behaviors that exemplify it. When someone raises an issue without a solution, ask exploratory questions rather than dismissing the concern. Share stories of failures in leadership meetings, focusing on what was learned. Allocate 10% of team meetings to discussing ideas that didn't work and why. Employee behaviors that exemplify it. Experiment with one new approach each quarter, documenting results. Spend time with customers outside formal feedback sessions. Propose improvements to existing processes, even small ones. Build on others' ideas rather than immediately critiquing them. Supporting changes needed. Adjust performance reviews to include experiments conducted as a metric. Create protected time for exploration that isn't consumed by urgent tasks. Change approval processes to enable faster small-scale testing. Notice the specificity. There aren't suggestions but observable behaviors you can coach to. Recognize and measure. A technology company client set an objective to break down silos and increase cross-functional collaboration. They reorganized into matrix structures. They implemented new collaboration software. They measured meeting attendance across departments. 18 months later, silos were stronger than ever. Why? Because the behaviors that actually got rewarded hadn't changed. Engineers were still evaluated entirely by their individual code contributions. Product managers owned success metrics for their product alone. When cross-functional conflicts arose, leaders sided with their team rather than solving for the company objective. What was missing was a mindset shift from protect my function's interests to optimize for the customer's needs. Before proposing a solution, talk to at least 2 people from different functions that engage with customers. In disagreements, reframe debates around customer impact rather than functional preferences. Share credit explicitly when presenting work that involved multiple teams. Framing around customer outcomes. Leaders should openly ask, what did other functions contribute when reviewing accomplishments? They should make trade-offs based on holistic customer experience, not departmental lobbying. Also, they will include cross-functional and customer feedback in every performance evaluation. Lastly, they will model asking for input outside their domain of expertise. The company eventually did this work. After a painful year of wondering why their reorganization had failed, once behaviors were defined and reinforced, collaboration significantly improved. Translating strategy into behavior requires uncomfortable specificity. It means answering questions like, what does someone do differently tomorrow to be successful with this objective? What's a meeting that would look fundamentally different? What would cause someone to hesitate or feel conflicted if they're operating the old way? What would we see less of if this behavior is taking hold? What would customers notice before we told them anything changed? What metric would move in the first 90 days if behaviors actually shifted? These questions feel tedious because they are. They're also the only path from strategic aspiration to operational reality. The most effective leaders I've encountered don't stop at defining objectives. Instead, they obsess over behavioral translation. They ask themselves, if someone shadowed me for a day, would they see me modeling this? They work with teams to identify what successful execution actually looks like in practice. Your strategy is only as good as your behavioral clarity. The next time you review a strategic plan, ask yourself, could someone use this document to change what they do tomorrow? Not theoretically, but practically? Would they know what conversations to have differently? What old habits should we abandon? If the answer is no, you don't have a strategy. You'll have aspirations. And aspirations without behavioral translation are just expensive wish lists that make everyone feel busy while changing nothing at all. That's it from Inc. Check out Inc.com for more expert opinions and advice from today's top business minds. Come back tomorrow for another tip from Inc.